This is SelfWork, and I'm Dr. Margaret Rutherford. At SelfWork, we discuss psychological and emotional issues and what you can do about them, whether that's learning self-acceptance, taking action, or seeking therapy or treatment. 8 years ago, I extended the walls of my practice to reach those of you who might already be knowledgeable about mental health treatment, but also to those of you who might say you'd never darken the door of a therapist. And yet, you are here. I'll answer your questions while I invite you to take a few minutes for your own self-work.
So I was just feeling incredibly alone standing on this stage, and this guy came walking up to me with like an emotional look on his face. And he said, I'd never heard my story until tonight.
Wow.
And I said, can I have a hug? And we hugged, and I just held on to him for dear life and cried.
Welcome to this week's edition of SelfWork. It's a little hard to describe Paul Gilmartin. One of the things I found out about him for this interview, I'd been on his podcast and didn't know this at the time, that he was one of the first hosts of the show Dinner and a Movie. In fact, he hosted that show for years, and people still recognize him when he's out and about. Since 2011, however, he's been the host of the Mental Illness Happy Hour podcast, where he interviews all kinds of people, occasionally a mental health professional, and he encourages folks on the podcast to be as honest as they're ready to be about things that many might have a struggle with revealing. Yet Paul's demeanor is such that you find yourself talking to him like no one's listening, which of course they will eventually be. He creates a safe space to do that within, and I found it quite a forgiving and emotional space. Something that also makes his podcast unique is that he encourages his listeners to fill out anonymous surveys so he knows what exactly they're going through, and no holes are barred as far as subject matter. But that's where his conversations go, into territory that holds shame or fear for many. You can perhaps tell I'm a huge advocate for his work. So what was it like for me to interview Paul? Well, first, I was delighted and honored he wanted to be a SelfWork guest. And he's exactly the way he encourages others to be. Extremely honest about his struggles. His own abuse as a child, which translated into addictions of all kinds as an adult. I'll let him explain that for you. Today, he talks graphically but factually about that abuse. So please listen carefully if you have abuse in your own history or anything that would make that triggering for you. And he's now set a permanent boundary between himself and his abuser, who was his mom, which is what he had to do to care for himself. So I am thrilled that for the 500th episode of SelfWork, I can either introduce you to the being that is Paul Gilmartin or reintroduce you to his work. First, let's hear from BetterHelp. The most common problem I hear from those seeking therapy is how hard it is to find a therapist, how long it takes, how vulnerable you feel asking around for names. BetterHelp solves those problems. After you make the first contact, their standard is to offer names of therapists to you in less than 2 days. And you can talk to them in a first session to see if it's a good fit. If so, you're on your way. But if not, rather than going through something awkward, you simply let BetterHelp know, and they'll ask what it was you didn't like and find someone else for you. You can text, chat, or talk virtually. All of those avenues are open to you. I'm a therapist because I got good therapy. I'd had no idea how much I could benefit from it, but I knew I wasn't seeing myself or my world clearly. Here's BetterHelp's offer for SelfWork listeners, 10% off your first month of sessions if you use this link, betterhelp.com/selfwork. You know, they say the best time to plant a tree is 30 years ago, but the next best is today. It's never too late to reach out and get help. BetterHelp.com/selfwork. And now, please join in my conversation with a lovely person, Paul Gilmartin. You know, Paul, I want to thank you again for having me on. I want to describe what it's like to go on to the mental illness happy hour. first you talk about your dog and your cat and it's just, and then you walk in and it's just, your home is beautiful. Your carpentry or your furniture is all over everywhere, and you have music and then you have the studio that is just warm and cozy. And then you have a way of listening that in fact, I read a perversely safe place when he and his guests talk about their fears, addictions, and traumatic childhoods. And that's exactly what it was. So welcome to SelfWork. And I'm just delighted to host you back.
I'm so glad to talk with you again. You were such an open and honest guest. And whenever I have a mental health professional on as a guest, I'm just always so thrilled when they get vulnerable and they reveal parts of themselves that they struggle with. I think it obviously means a lot to me, but I know it means a lot to the listeners, especially the listeners out there who are afraid of starting therapy because they,
Oh, yeah.
they have this image in their head that it's going to be like a parent judging them or a teacher telling them what to do. And
Right. Right.
I just love stories. So, yeah.
Well, I've actually researched you more since you were coming on here than I did, sadly, when I came on your program. And I didn't realize that I didn't really know the thing, but that perhaps one of the things you're most known for, and that you had been on television in Dinner and a Movie. I didn't even know that.
I forget sometimes.
Do you?
Somebody will say to me, "Yeah, some of the guys I play hockey with, they confided in me that when they first encountered me at a skate, they were like, 'Oh my God, this guy from Dinner and a Movie,' and I watched him my whole childhood, and it's obviously very, very flattering, but I forget. I forget that people might recognize me from that. And it was, even though I was kind of in emotional turmoil a lot of those years, it was a special time in my life because a lot of my professional dreams and aspirations were coming true. And of course, be careful what you wish for.
Exactly. Well, I read some things. There's little clues here and there in what you say. You talk at one point about a narcissistic mom, you talk about sexual violation, but I don't know if that actually is part of your history on alcoholism.
It is. Yeah, it was very covert, but yeah.
So I'm eager to hear a little bit of your story.
Okay.
Whatever you want to share.
Well, what would you like to know? Because there's so much. So, I'm an open book. So anything that you would like to know,
let's start with a narcissistic mom. Why don't we start there?
Yeah. She had an incredibly, painful, abandoning childhood. She, her father left when she was a little girl. He didn't want to work. And so her mom, my grandmother, kicked him out. And the grandmother then left my mom to be raised by family friends. And the father was an alcoholic. And and it was in a tiny town where there was kind of par for the course back then. A Catholic school that she went to where there was kind of sadistic physical abuse, and I'm sure sexual stuff as well. And for as long as I can remember, I've been spouseified and kind of sexualized and objectified and infantilized by her, kind of all over the map.
Okay.
I remember at 7, her breaking down and crying. It was just her and I in the house. Her breaking down and crying about how rotten my dad was and how rotten we kids were and how she wanted to leave us and we were selfish bastards, and she was just sobbing. And I didn't know that it's inappropriate, to do that in front of your kids. So I became her therapist.
Mm-hmm.
Not all the time, but that was the moment I placed her needs ahead
Ahead
of
of
mine.
yours. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And my mom is, in my mind, this delicate person that needs to be given what she wants and protected. And so, um, my brother never had an issue with standing up to her because I was kind of the golden child and he was kind
Mm-hmm.
of the scapegoat, and they butted heads for as long as I can remember.
Mm-hmm.
And
Was he older than you?
yeah, 1 year older.
1 year older? Mm-hmm.
And I think it kind of set me up for just not even knowing what I wanted, what boundaries could be. She There were a lot of, she would shame me if I was naked and wanted to cover up. There was just always this feeling that she just wanted to drink every inch of me
Of
in.
who
And
you were. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and she never touched my genitals, but there were a lot of unnecessary reasons for me to be naked. And
You
some of,
couldn't begin to grow away from her and
no,
develop your own privacy and that kind of thing. No, that
no,
wasn't allowed. Yeah.
no, I was kind of shamed, chided, maybe is a better word for that. And so I would give her what she want. And one time I got aroused and it freaked me the fuck out.
I'm
And I
sure
thought,
did.
oh, you're a little monster.
Mm-hmm. Of course,
Who
you would
does?
think you were wrong to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And of course I didn't unpack that for decades. And then, I was like, wow, the roles were reversed. I was supposed to be the child. She was supposed to be the
Mm-hmm.
parent. And it's it would have been nice if I could have gone to her and if I was having a problem, if I was feeling unsafe, to let her know what I was thinking or
Yes.
feeling. But it wasn't modeled for her. She's not a bad person. I eventually had to cut contact with her
Did you?
because not because of what she did, but because she wouldn't own it. And she wouldn't respect my current boundaries that I asked, which were very reasonable.
Yeah, sure. Was any of your being drawn to performing and comedy and all that was that part of how you were seeking some kind
100%.
of yeah, mm-hmm,
I wanted to be seen.
yeah,
I wanted to be
exactly.
validated. It's that and attention from females.
Mm-hmm,
As
mm-hmm.
young as I can remember, I just had this sexual charge that I felt like nobody else in the world had. And I just assumed it was because I was inherently bad, dirty,
Yeah.
perverted, whatever you want to call it. And I just had such an interest in females' bodies, kind of the way my mom had an interest in my body.
Yeah.
Um, I'm grateful that my mom, never showed me her body. I think that would have really done a number on my
Yeah.
head because a
It
lot
does.
of the
I've certainly had that in my own clients.
oh yeah, and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the people that I have talked to since I started coming out about in unpacking in real time, my confusion and sadness and pain and all of that stuff, people began coming out of the woodwork, reaching out to me and saying, my mom did the same thing. Women saying, my mom used to put lotion on my vagina for really fucking sketchy reasons that made no sense.
Right.
They would say my mom used to walk around the house naked, even though we told her it made us uncomfortable. She would
Mm-hmm.
use the bathroom with the door open. She
Right.
would check on us in the shower. And it's this,
Mm-hmm.
sure, this as a therapist, it is this pattern that is not talked about, and it is really common. Not like every person has it, but it a sizable portion, I believe, of the
80%
population.
of sexual abuse is from someone you know, from
Yeah,
someone you're close to. Mm-hmm.
and a shocking amount is by female
Right? Right?
abusers.
Right?
Yeah, When I first started telling my story, I was so afraid of somebody saying, "Why are you making such a big deal out
Yeah.
of this?" I think every survivor,
Mhm.
"Oh, suck it
Mhm.
up," um, or "That's not
You weren't
abuse."
hungry. Yeah. Mhm.
Right, exactly. And the first time I told my story in a live setting was a storytelling show. I don't know, maybe a year into processing this. So this would have been like, I don't know, 13, 14 years ago.
Wow.
And and I desperately wanted to feel seen and validated, but I was also terrified because this wasn't a one-on-one with a trusted person like you. This was in
Mhm.
front of a small audience.
Mhm.
Um,
Was it televised too?
no,
No.
no, it was locally here in LA, and it was called Taboo Tales. So everybody, so I knew, okay, this is an appropriate place to share. It's
Right.
not like I was doing it at an open mic night for
Right.
comedy.
Right.
Um, but my knees were knocking. My body was shaking as I
Mhm.
told this. And afterwards, I just wanted to run. And when the show
Like
was
you've done
over,
something wrong or
like like I'm gross, like I'm
yeah. You
being
take on the shame as
exhibitionistic.
if you yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like Jesus Christ, have some self-respect, you know.
Mhm.
Do have you no shame.
Mhm.
Actually, I have a lot of shame.
Yeah, an
But
overabundance actually.
yeah, so I was just feeling incredibly alone standing on this stage, and this guy came walking up to me with like an emotional look on his face. And he said, I'd never heard my story until tonight.
Wow.
And I said, can I have a hug? And we hugged, and I just
Mhm.
like held on to him for dear life and,
Mhm.
you know, cried. And moments like that put all of this into a larger perspective, and being able to find meaning and purpose in the wreckage of these things
Mhm.
um, is a beautiful silver lining. But the
Mhm.
ripples of, the wires getting crossed, the is a struggle I'm so fucking tired of.
Yeah.
You know, the
Yeah.
feelings that come up when I share my story.
Mhm.
Sometimes,
Mhm.
my therapists say there are women who will sometimes be recounting a traumatic sexual event, and they'll have an orgasm
Oh yeah.
describing it. And
Yes.
that blew my mind because I always felt dirty if like a feeling came up. And for me, the feeling is more of, I want a mommy. I want it. I don't get it when I tell it to a male, but when I tell it to a compassionate female, I just like, I just want her to hold me.
You have those same feelings you did at the time that were appropriate to the situation, but your
Yeah,
mother made it inappropriate. Right, right, right.
yeah, yeah. And I had that fantasy, that non-sexual fantasy as a little boy. I remember as old as 7 or 8 wanting to go. I went to a Catholic grade school, and I just remember so vividly looking at the girls on the playground who were, eighth graders, and I'm in first or second grade,
Hmm. Hmm.
and just wanting to go up and just be enveloped in their arms and cry. And I never knew what that was about until I started unpacking this about 12 years ago. And I was like, oh, of course.
Several things are coming to mind, but there are also people who become aroused when they are being abused,
Yeah.
and they don't understand that their body responds just like yours did, and even as an adult, and that is a shame that a lot of people carry by themselves. Similar to what you're saying, when I first moved here, I worked in a community center, and this woman came in, and she was kind of a typical what you think of as a Arkansas ranch woman. She had on the jeans and boots and all that stuff, and she came in and she said, "I have something terrible to tell you." And she talked to me about how her father had sexually abused her in his truck, and we talked about it, and she left, and she came back the next time, and she said, you know, uh, I have something worse to tell you. And I listened, and she said, he made me do it to my brother, my younger brother. And I listened, and she canceled her next appointment. And I called her and I said, I'm a little concerned, that we would open all that up, and then you wouldn't come back. And she said, well, I feel pretty good. And I said, well, would you mind just coming back one time, just for my own, whatever. She came back. And this is what she said. She said, I'd always imagined that I knew what the look would be on somebody's face when I told them that I had done this to my brother. And you didn't look like that. And she said, all of a sudden, all of this weight came off of me. And I learned so much from her. And, when I hear that just 12 years ago, I'm sad for you that you didn't start unpacking this before then, but you obviously did. And I hope you had that same experience, that when you said these things to someone who you chose to talk to, that what you expected to have happen, whatever kind of look of disgust or, whatever you imagined would be on their face, that you didn't experience that.
I didn't, and I'm so grateful for that. And it's funny because I always, when people are saying, how do I find a good therapist? And I always say, for me, what they say is important, but I scan the look on their faces.
Yeah.
And that to me lets me know if it's safe or not. And I see it in their faces. And I remember the first time I shared my story in a support group around intimacy struggles and addiction. And it was a mixed meeting.
Because alcohol became a part of your struggle
too.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a different support group. This one was around physical intimacy and, et cetera, et cetera. And as I was telling my story, I couldn't make eye contact with anybody. I was looking at my feet, and I started to cry. And at one point, I looked up, and there were people in there, especially women, who were crying with me.
Also crying. Mm-hmm.
That was one of the most powerful moments I've ever experienced in my life, because a part of my story is also being a womanizer and a serial cheater and an objectifier. I know I've wounded women out there. I always told myself, no, you're not a part of the, you're just sneaky. But I look back and it's like, just because there wasn't physical wrestling doesn't mean that it wasn't coercive. Badgering somebody into having sex with you is coercive. And I didn't, at the time, maybe I'm making excuses for myself, but I didn't believe that at the time. And after I started sharing about my womanizing, and heard the stories from women who had talked about being worn down by men, and men as well, being worn down by women. And I've been on that side of it as well. I suddenly felt the weight of my actions. And so I carried that shame as well. And that was a part of my share. And to see women still empathizing with me, that I wasn't just strictly, this cancer on society, that I was, a flawed but lovable human being. And one of them came up to me and said, and I've heard this from listeners as well, where they say, I will never get an apology from the man that violated me, but hearing you having regret and apologizing for what you did, I take comfort in that. And it's nice to know that not all men are conscienceless.
Right. Again, I'm quoting you. You said you went from a cancer on society to a little bit of the medicine. So I liked that too.
Tiny bit. A tiny little dab.
So let's take a break, and we'll be back in just a moment. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, which offers us a reminder that whatever you're going through, you don't have to go through it alone. When I went through divorce, when I was trying to understand why I developed panic disorder, I went to therapy. And that therapist helped me to sort out not only the whys of my life, why it was happening, but the how it was happening, and figure out the changes I needed to make to become more stable. Your friends are more likely to see things from only your perspective, yet a therapist can have a much broader perspective to offer, and a more objective one at that. BetterHelp, with over 30,000 licensed therapists, has served 6 million people globally, and their client reviews reflect excellence in that experience. Asking for help isn't weakness. It shows intense determination to reach your goal, whatever that goal happens to be. You let BetterHelp know what those goals are, and they match you with an experienced therapist who can help you with those goals. You don't have to be on this journey alone. Find support and have someone with you in therapy. Sign up and get 10% off at BetterHelp.com. That's better, HELP.com. So you actually started Mental Illness Happy Hour before you went into treatment. If it was 12 years ago, and Mental Illness Happy Hour is 2011, is that right?
2011, and I started processing the things in I started going to support group for drugs and alcohol in 2003. I've been sober since that day.
Good
I started going. I found myself in 2009 wanting to cheat again, and so I started going to a support group for that. So then in 2011, I started the podcast, and in 2012, all of the thoughts and feelings began to come up around the incest stuff, et cetera, and I believe it was because I found my people. I found a safe place where there were a lot of shared experiences, and because I was going through a period of abstinence from numbing myself with acting out.
Because the guests you have are not all like psychiatrists or psychologists, or they're just people, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I imagine that was in reaching out to offer a space that you were, I guess, I'm sure you were trying to make it safe. It may have also opened you up to some things that were happening.
100%. And honestly, I started the podcast because it's what I had really needed and didn't know that I wanted when I began facing myself. I wanted, the template really was support group meetings where there's laughter, there's tears, there's raw honesty and vulnerability. And more than anything, stories where we don't have the answers, but we're just kind of stumbling in the dark by ourselves. Yeah, some people are a couple steps ahead of us with the flashlight, but
and thank God for that.
Thank God for that. So that was the template. And it wasn't until all the kind of the lava started coming up in me in 2012 that I realized, I still need to be, have my hand held in the dark, because here's this next wave. It has nothing to do with drugs and alcohol, but it has to do with my sense of self, my childhood, all these other things. So I do the podcast as much to feel seen as I do, I think, to help other people. And that's something I feel shame about, because I feel like, oh my God, you're making it about yourself again. And, listeners will assure me, we love hearing about, your life and your struggles. It humanizes you, et cetera, But, I let about 30% of that sink in, and the other 70% is like, no, you're a narcissist, just like your mom.
No. Well, my no warning bells went off for me about that. What have you, Mental Illness Happy Hour is one of the top mental health podcasts out there and has been for a long time. How has it changed you doing it? What do you think is something that you try to offer that's maybe unique in that space?
I think a willingness to talk about the stuff that nobody thinks they would ever say or hear out loud, because
Okay.
that's what I needed. Um,
Mhm.
Nothing is too dark for the show. And a lot of people are like, I can't listen anymore, or I have to take a couple of years off from listening.
Really?
Yeah,
Because you talk about what?
such dark, such dark,
Oh,
dark things. Incest, suicide, um, you name it. You name it. It can be a house of horrors, or it can be a light and funny episode just about the negative voice in our head that's keeping us
mhm,
from being productive.
mhm.
It runs the gamut, and I try to mix it up as much as I can. But I feel like it creates a safe sense of community for people, and because of that sense of safety, whether it's a guest or a listener filling out an anonymous survey sharing about their life,
Right.
I get a peek inside their, whatever you want to call it, their struggle, their darkness, their wounds, that it helps me feel less alone, and it educates me. So it educates me
Mhm,
emotionally, and that
mhm.
I feel less kind of isolated and like, oh, I'm an outlier. I'm not like other people. No, I am. Maybe
Yeah, you
what
are.
happened to me doesn't happen to every person, but the ripples that have been left, everybody's got some version of shame, guilt. I'm not enough. I don't have enough. I don't do enough. Or I'm too much. I happen to have both. It's either I'm too much, I'm Mr. TMI, or I'm lazy and I can't do shit. But I feel like what I've gotten from it is an education, because when people share in their anonymous surveys, they share.
Talk
Uh,
about those, because what I saw that now, I did see that when I was coming on as your guest, and I did look at that, but I that was several months ago. So talk about that a little bit,
well,
please.
maybe a year into doing the podcast, I started wanting to hear the stories and the experiences of the listeners, and so I would create a survey themed around, um, uh, things that have happened to them, things they've done, their deepest, darkest thoughts, happy moments,
Mhm.
moments that were fucked up at the time but are kind of funny in retrospect. You name it. Bullying at work. There's tons
Yeah,
of them. There's
yeah,
probably a
yeah.
dozen different ones. But the one that is really the hallmark is a survey that's called the Shame and Secrets Survey,
Oh, okay.
because that I realized had driven a lot of my unhealthy coping
Mhm.
mechanisms my whole life, and in some ways still do. And I have learned so much and gotten comfort, and also just felt so sad reading so many of these surveys.
Mhm.
Um, I've learned about how the link between trauma and sexual fantasies.
Yeah.
And I'm very proud that we tackle that on the
Mhm.
podcast. That
Mhm.
I'm so grateful to the people that write in. There's a survey that I often paraphrase. There was a guy that filled one out who had a redheaded babysitter when he was a boy, and she would make him finger her.
Mhm.
And the only thing that he can orgasm to today is watching a video where a finger is being
Okay.
inserted into a woman with red pubic hair. And
Mhm.
that kind of, in a nutshell, is one of the things that I have learned. And obviously for other people, it could be, that would trigger the fuck out of me, and I would be shut down and
Yeah.
wouldn't be
Yeah.
able to function for days.
Yeah.
But I've learned so much about sexuality, trauma, especially female sexuality. I think I've always wanted to know about it because in some ways I've wanted to crack my mom. I've wanted to
Mm-hmm.
know, what were you thinking? What were
Mm-hmm.
you getting out of it? What
Mm-hmm.
was your experience? Were you conscious of why you were doing this?
How long
Um,
ago did you kind of break contact with her?
Probably 2014. I broke contact for a year in 2012 and then said, okay, let's correspond via letters because
Yeah.
she has the tendency to kind of dominate a conversation. You can't get a word in edgewise. And and I thought, well, if she has to write it out, and
Just,
it's she'll have to deal with the writer's cramp. And but I said, I don't want to talk about the past because I just had this feeling, it's just going to upset me more. And she didn't know that I'd had this revelation
mm-hmm.
about things. Eventually, she did because a friend of hers heard it on the podcast and told
Okay.
her. But she didn't respect the boundaries about talking about the past. You know,
Mm-hmm. She kept
so
trying to bring it up, bring it up.
yeah, yeah, you know, yeah, throwing other people under the bus.
You're not remembering it right.
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 And then when she did admit that I remembered it right, she said, I didn't know I had a terrible childhood. You know, okay, but that's not the time,
Mm-mm.
to
I'm
say that to
sorry,
your
but I'm
kid.
sorry, but
Right. And
it's
so there
terrible.
was never a kind of a heartfelt sorry. And that's what I wanted to feel seen. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to feel a sense of my pain feeling seen. And I was just like, this relationship feels like a one-way street. Now, somebody else who maybe is more resilient or forgiving could have a relationship, but I had to face the fact that it negatively affected my mental health, and I'm not responsible for her happiness, and I need to feel safe in this world. And so I sent her a goodbye letter, and I wrote, I love you. I'm not mad at you. I wish we could have a relationship, but I cannot handle it mentally. And I thanked her for the things that she did give me in life because there were many parts of my mom that were wonderful and amazing. And she
Even more
was so,
confusing.
so confusing, so confusing. Um, so yeah, that's kind of my long-winded answer about
Oh,
what
I'm
I've
with you.
gotten and learned from doing the
So,
podcast.
what made you get out of comedy?
I just did not like any of it except for the writing the joke and then getting to get a reaction on stage that night. I still to this day love that part of it, but
Mm-hmm.
it, the traveling, the
Oh yeah.
performing for drunks at midnight, being away from home,
The
having trouble,
lifestyle. Mm-hmm.
the lifestyle. Yeah. And I just also felt like once I started, there was an overlap where I was still doing the TV show. I was still doing stand up and I had started the podcast. And about 6 months into doing the podcast, the TV show got canceled. And so um, I, I had no desire to do any more TV at that point. I was like, this moves my soul doing this
Mm-hmm.
podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And my then wife, fortunately, was extremely supportive, and she was making good money at that time. And I'd printed out an email that somebody had sent me, a listener, that said, I thought about taking my life this weekend, and then I heard your podcast and I changed my mind, and I
Wow.
just want to thank you. And I didn't intend for anybody to see it, but my wife had printed something out and she came
She
across it and she
saw it.
read it and she
Mm-hmm.
said, you keep doing this podcast. Don't worry about the money.
Yeah.
Well, and
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for that. And I
I'm sure there
also,
are other people that feel that way too.
I, I thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I just felt like the universe had opened this door for me. And like my higher power, the universe, whatever you want to call it, was like, this is the next phase for you.
Mhm.
And I could feel it because I have been fortunate enough to be able to follow my inspiration wherever it is in my life and to make a living doing that. And I just had the feeling that maybe one day that would happen, and a couple of years into it of not making any money doing it, advertisers started
Mhm.
coming around. And
Mhm.
before I knew it, I was supporting myself. And
Mhm. Mhm.
it's not as what it used to be because there's so much competition there and there is financial pressure nowadays. And
Mhm.
it's, I've had to definitely, downsize. Not that I ever lived extravagantly, but money is definitely a big concern these days. But I do still feel like this is where I'm supposed to be.
Mhm. Well, if my experience is anything like everybody else's, it was I mean, I felt uh I was surprised by how I mean, it's not, I guess I am a little proud, maybe a little too proud that I I'm open about myself pretty much, but I shared some things that I had not, some current struggles. It's fine to say, oh yeah, I struggled with that. I used to struggle with that. To say you struggle with it still, it's kind of shitty. It's real scary. So, anyway, I just, it's a wonderful place to offer people to come. And I think you're special to do it. Tell me about you as a furniture maker,
My favorite topic.
carpenter.
Um, I took a woodworking class in high school, and immediately I was like, this feels like home. The
Yeah.
smell of the sawdust, every part of it. I've always loved wood. I've been a guitar player for most of my life, and
Hmm.
you get a deep connection to wood playing
Sure, of
guitar.
course.
But I just have always loved the variety and the beauty and the texture of wood.
Hmm.
And when I got sober in 2003, I started woodworking again. And I suppose kind of approached it alcoholically, but I did, I had the free time because, I didn't have a 9 to 5 job. I was working in TV and our filming schedule was very intermittent. And so I just dove headfirst into it and um, just started tapping into a part of my creative self that comedy could never really
Hmm.
tap into, that
Hmm.
music could never really tap into. Um, and I suppose it's the problem solving. Part of writing jokes is also solving a problem. I want to say this. How do I do it? What are the right words? What's the right sentence structure? How can I make it lean and
Yeah,
stylish?
there's an
But
architecture to it.
there
Hmm.
is. And with furniture, obviously, it is literally an architecture. And
Hmm.
I just loved it. And I still love it to this day. And I have a wood shop in my garage and I build um, furniture. Some of them are original designs by me. It's called Shaped Furniture Studio. So if you go to shapedfurniture.com,
Okay.
you can see some of my furniture. It's kind of a blend of mid-century modern and some
Hmm.
Japanese stuff. And yeah, I love it. It's my happy place.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you have some pieces in your home that were really lovely, and
Thank you.
yeah, yeah. So, what's the future like for you? What feels like it's a good place to direct yourself to now?
I don't know. It kind of scares me. It kind of
Hmm.
scares me. The political instability in this
Hmm.
country. And I have to really work hard to not catastrophize and to just keep it one day at a time. It's hard. That's
Hmm.
where a lot of my anxiety kind of
You
goes
just cannot
into.
scroll. You cannot spend hours and hours listening to that
Yeah.
stuff or reading that stuff. You just can't. You could have to take it in doses.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to stay present and try to have a moral compass and be the guy I want to be. And some days I feel like I hit the mark, and other days I feel like I fall short. But, I
Well,
suppose a
isn't
lot
that
of
being
people do.
human? I mean, my God, I feel the same way.
Uh, I
um,
suppose so. I suppose.
Often a new client will come in and I'll just kind of look up at the sky when they leave and think, okay, I can see now what you want me to learn because I may be half a page in front of this person.
Right. Yeah.
So, you just all got things we need to learn. Um, well, I want to thank you, and I could not recommend Mental Illness Happy Hour more. And to people who want that kind of honesty and that kind of openness, and anything else you want to share?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Yeah, it's just so nice talking to you. Man, if I lived in Arkansas, you would be my therapist because I feel like I could tell you anything, and you're just so compassionate and wise, and I can't imagine how many people's lives you have changed for the better.
Well, I can believe, but I can't quite believe that this episode is our 500th episode. Of course, I must thank, with an incredibly grateful heart, John Crowley, who is my fantastic audio engineer and producer, and Christine Matthias, who does graphics and the newsletter and helps me out with the podcast however she can, and she schedules guests as a producer herself. But then I've got to thank all of you who have come back week after week and let me know by asking questions, by making comments and suggestions that you are a part of SelfWork and you're doing your own self-work. As we enter into our 10th year in December, no, actually it'll be our 11th year in December. We'll have our 10th anniversary in December of 2026. I hope you'll invite even more friends and colleagues to share SelfWork. It's an honor to be here with you. Thank you, of course, if this is your first time on SelfWork or one of many. You're very appreciated. Please take care of yourself, your loved ones, and your community. I'm Dr. Margaret, and this has been the 500th episode of SelfWork.